steak on a Wednesday. Good day. I'm Max Kellerman. How we doing? Good to see you. Stephen A. from the West Coast. How we feeling?
What's up? What's up? Good morning. How y'all doing?
Killing it on Kimmel last night. I saw you.
Little sun.
Yeah.
Had a good time. Had a good time.
This man belongs in late night. Speaking of that, as Stephen A. obviously was on Kimmel last night, we're going to show you a clip of that later in the show, so don't miss it. We'll react to that as well. But meanwhile, Colin Kaepernick has been the most talked about NFL player this season since his initial protest during the national anthem. Now he has the chance to make headlines for his play on the field and turn around his team's losing 1-4 record. Chip Kelly has named him the starter for Week 6. He'll get his first nod of the season in Buffalo Sunday. Cap, are you ready?
I think I've always been confident. You know, it's something that I'm ready to step on that field. I'm ready to play. It's been about a year since live game action, so I'm itching to get out there. For me, I try to carry myself confidently and appropriately, whatever environment I'm in. And, you know, hopefully that reflects and my teammates feel that way and they feel that I can lead this team to victory. I'm excited to be back out there. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to, you know, be out there with my teammates and fight with them and try to get this win this Sunday. I'm ready.
On the road, as I said earlier, in Buffalo Sunday. Stephen A., would you have made this move to Cap this week?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have hesitated. It should have been done weeks ago. The fact of the matter is Blaine Gabbert, as my former colleague here at ESPN, and my friend Chris Carter religiously said Blaine Gabbert stinks. Now, Blaine Gabbert is on the record saying that the decision stinks, but maybe if he looked at his play and realized that a 65 passer rating combined with the fact that he's 9-31 as a starter, that he's lost 4 straight, that his entire quarterbacking career in the National Football League has been rife with ineptitude, maybe he'd realize how bad he was and wouldn't have a problem with it. Just be happy that you're going to be a backup in the league, because chances are you won't play that much. That way people will assume you can still play and you'll still have a job in the NFL, rather than being exposed by being put on the field and showing the world how ill-equipped you are to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. So that's my take on that. As it pertains to Kaepernick, this is a decision that should have been made a long time ago, because Blaine Gabbert should have never been a starter as far as I'm concerned. I think it was the combination of the contract that Colin Kaepernick had, insuring himself for major dollars in the event of injury, combined with the fact that he was making some noise with the whole protesting of the national anthem and beyond. There's no doubt in my mind that when it comes to Chip Kelly and the San Francisco 49ers, particularly somebody like Trent Baalke, I think all of those, not one individual issue, but all of them, the cumulative impact of it led to Colin Kaepernick sitting out this long. But you are 1-4, and since Trent Baalke obviously sabotaged this franchise by running Jim Harbaugh out of there, and which means that any respectability that they had went right out the door with him, trying to make sure that you don't continue to nosedive, you had to do something. Blaine Gabbert wasn't going to be the answer. And even though it's against the 5th-ranked defense that is the Buffalo Bills, I don't give a damn. Get Colin Kaepernick in there ASAP, quick, fast, and in a hurry. As far as I'm concerned, it's a few weeks too late. He should have been back weeks ago. But if he has to come back this week, even though it's against the Bills, it doesn't bother me at all. It is necessary, because nothing was going to get done with Blaine Gabbert.
If you think that Colin Kaepernick is the long-term solution, possibly, for the 49ers, and I do, and I thought Kaepernick should have been starting weeks ago, and we've been talking about that on this show, Stephen A. Smith. But if you believe that Kaepernick is the long-term solution for the 49ers, and I think the 49ers think that's a possibility, which is one of the reasons they hired Chip Kelly. I mean, in the recent past, we've seen Kaepernick do it. Well, what makes you think he can be the long-term solution? He just did it. Took him to a Super Bowl. One throw away from taking him to consecutive Super Bowls.
So what are you saying, Max?
I'll worry about what I'm saying. If you believe...
Well, I'm waiting.
That could... I know you don't talk for 5 straight minutes and then say you're waiting now.
I'm waiting for your answer.
If you believe that Kaepernick can be the solution, then you do not play him against the Buffalo Bills. And the reason you don't play him against the Buffalo Bills is you have to ask yourself, what is your short-term incentive versus what's your long-term incentive?
That is ridiculous.
If the idea is that Chip Kelly and the 49ers believe that we just got to worry about this game, that's the nature of the NFL, let's get him out there, then fine, you start Kaepernick now, even if you get disastrous results. But if you believe that the Niners, when they hired Chip, had a plan for Kaepernick, we can rehabilitate this situation. Let's not forget that the reason Kaepernick started to regress, it seems to me, and to many, is that the Niners had good intentions. Wow, as good as he is now, can he get even better if we change certain things? And the answer was no. He was as good as he was going to get. And you know what? That was plenty good enough. And he has to go back to being that guy. So they hired Chip to do just that. Chip studied him when he was at Nevada. He looked at Kaepernick because he's the kind of quarterback that, Chip wanted to play with. And so now they got him. Now, when they hired Chip, Kaepernick started talking about he wants a trade. Probably lost the locker room at that point. They said he had a dead arm. Probably code for he's hurt. If he's healthy now, and partly as a result of his courageous, in many respects, stance or sit and then knee, in regards to the national anthem, if that helped him rally parts of the locker room now around him and he is ready to play, then great. But don't start him against a team that has hit more quarterbacks than any but 2 in the entire NFL, even if it's on 10 days rest on the road. You want to get them off on the right foot. It's not about this season. The Niners ain't going to the playoffs. They're not good. But if Chip wants to save his job, if Kaepernick wants a career, if the Niners want a franchise quarterback going forward, who, after all, they have contractual obligation to anyway, then you want what's best for Kaepernick and the team over the long haul of this season, not right now. And that is Tampa Bay at home, not Buffalo on the road.
Max Kellerman, the only thing you said there that makes any sense is the fact that you said none of it, actually, other than this one point that I'm about to bring up. If he were not healthy enough. Outside of that, nothing you said makes sense. Sports is about competition. The San Francisco 49ers are losing football games. Blaine Gabbert is your quarterback. If Colin Kaepernick is ready to go, what are you talking about? If Colin Kaepernick is the long-term solution, you don't put him in with the Bills. I'm sorry, one play, one game could ruin anything. You go out there the second that you're ready. Every single week in the NFL, there are only 16 games in the season. Every single week in the NFL, your best players, your best options should be out there if healthy enough to be out there. Period.
You don't sit up there.
The way you sounded, hold on, the way you sounded, it's as if even if Colin Kaepernick were healthy, because he's going up against the Bills, we have to think about our future, our long-range goals, and we certainly don't want to jeopardize the health of Colin Kaepernick, so we're not going to put him out there. That's
the confidence
asinine.
Of Kaepernick,
That's asinine.
The confidence of Kaepernick, the enthusiasm of the fan base, the head coach's job. Yes, you are making the mistake that many people.
The enthusiasm of the fan base?
That's right.
Did you mention a fan base and Blaine Gabbert in the same sentence?
How long has Blaine Gabbert been better than Colin Kaepernick? Has he been better than Colin Kaepernick the last couple of weeks?
I don't ever recall him being better than Colin Kaepernick.
But Kaepernick over the last several weeks has been a better option than Blaine Gabbert, and yet he hasn't started. There are more considerations than just the game that week. If that was the only consideration.
How do you know?
Do you think you just said by your own admission you just said that he's the better option than Gabbert over the last several weeks, but he didn't start.
No, I'm talking about the other options that you said was probably being considered. I'm saying, how do you know? Conventional wisdom in the sport of professional football, you put your best players out there, the guys that give you the best chance to win week to week. You don't look towards 8 weeks from now. You don't look towards next season. You look towards every single week.
Some franchises do that don't always make the best decisions. You're making you are confused in the same way many football fans and some franchises are confused. You're confusing the team with the franchise. The team is the current iteration of the franchise. That's this week's game. The franchise is the thing that's still going to be there. And if the franchise thinks that they may have a franchise quarterback who can play for a coach that they just hired to coach this guy, and they think that's a long-term solution, given the fact that we all know the Niners ain't going anywhere this year, make the best choice for the franchise.
How do you know that if you're the 49ers and it's week 3 or it's week 4, whatever the case may be? I'm saying you didn't even need to wait until you were 1-4 to bring Kaepernick in there.
Sure.
He could have been put up in there last week. He could have been put up in there 2 weeks ago, 2 games ago. He said he was ready to go.
Yep.
So we have to look at Chip Kelly, we have to look at Trent Baalke, and we have to question why the delay, why the procrastination, particularly for Blaine Gabbert. It makes absolutely positively no sense, and Max is trying to deduce that it makes sense because you know what? We want to look towards the future, and Colin Kaepernick may very well be our future. This is the same Colin Kaepernick that Chip Kelly and them were trying to trade to Denver, but couldn't work out a deal to get it done. Clearly, they didn't think that way about him.
When they hired Chip Kelly, Kaepernick wanted out, so they started exploring ways to get him out. And when it wasn't going to work because he wasn't going to take a reduction in his contract, which he shouldn't have, he did the right thing, they started realizing, okay, well, I mean, this is the kind of quarterback Chip Kelly needs anyway, but he wasn't ready to play. This predates the anthem protest. He'd lost a lot of weight. He'd switched his diet. They called it a dead arm, which I take as code for something wrong with his throwing arm. Then he got better. He started putting on the weight. Chip said he's still not quite there yet. Okay, now he's there. It's yet is finally here. But it comes against an excellent, hot defense on the road. And what I'm saying is, unless you think you're going to salvage this season in terms of the playoffs, make the right long-term decision.
Why would you not think you got a shot at salvaging your season? Who gives up 5 games in? That's what you're saying. Oh, the season's lost, so why jeopardize his future by playing him against the Buffalo Bills? That is asinine. It's game 6 of the season.
That's right. A one-win team that going in, no one thought was very good anyway, and has so far shown that they are, in fact, not very good.
So they're supposed to think like that.
To make the playoffs.
Supposed to say that. So
be realistic.
So according to Max Kellerman, the San Francisco 49ers are supposed to sit up there and go like this. We stink. We're not going anywhere. Our season's over in week 6. So why would we jeopardize our future, Colin, by playing you now? No, we're going to sit you down because we stink. So we'll wait until we got a weak opponent because we're not going to win anyway. So why play? That's your argument.
You know what?
That's your argument.
It's the same thing when Belichick was talking about, hey, the trainers do their jobs. If he's ready to go, I worry about the coaching. That's not exactly true because sometimes a guy's ready to go, but what are the implications if he takes another hit? What's the long-term prognosis versus the short-term prognosis, and the franchise has to weigh all those things in the balance and make a decision. Happens all the time.
Executive Kellerman, I totally don't understand what the hell you're talking about. It makes no sense from a sports competitive standpoint. A
lot of football people would agree with you, and you'd all be wrong.
A lot of football people get fired because they don't know what the hell they're saying, regardless of how they try to sound like that.
Didn't you say Chip Kelly was on the hot seat?
Should be.
All right,
shouldn't have had
gentlemen.
the damn job.
That wasn't even the biggest news yesterday in the Bay Area. The Cubs erased a 3-run deficit in the 9th inning of Game 4 in San Francisco to come back and win 6-5 and move on to the NLCS. That's tied for the largest 9th inning comeback in a postseason game in MLB history, a comeback fans are never going to forget. Westgate Las Vegas Superbook currently has the Cubs as a 5-4 favorite to win it all. The Blue Jays have the second best odds at 5-2. Max, would you take the Cubs or the field in the World Series?
The field. That clear enough an answer for you, Stephen A? The field.
Thank you. Thank God. You came right out and gave it to me. I'm so touched. I'm so touched.
You two are unbelievable.
You get it. Every argument. You just don't know it.
I did not have to wait an hour for your answer. I'm thankful. Go ahead.
I cannot believe the delusion that you think you wait. All right.
Let's get a clock.
Go ahead.
I need a clock, a stopwatch.
Let's put a clock on it. Exactly.
Go ahead.
Like in speed chess.
I think you want the camera time. That's what I think.
The Cubs are a 100-plus win team. And 100-plus win teams, qualitatively different than other kinds of teams. I mean, you win 100 games, they're the best team in baseball. The Cubs are the best team in baseball. The thing about baseball, and football for that matter, is these are fundamentally probabilistic sports. They are not deterministic the way I would argue the NBA is. Not college, one and done in the tournament. Best team doesn't always win. In the NBA, best of 7, best team always wins. I mean, the champion deserves to be champion. Not case in football. We've seen many Super Bowl champions. People accuse me as a Giants fan, oh, they got a little lucky. No, you're right, they did. Absolutely. Were they necessarily the best team that year? No, not necessarily, but they got hot at the right time. Same thing is true in baseball, Stephen A. Smith. If you run into a team, even if you're the superior team, even if you have the secret sauce that Nate Silver and others looked into several years ago when they found that all the conventional baseball wisdom about pitching and defense wins in the postseason is in fact true. It is true. Pitching and defense wins. Guys who don't make errors, guys with good range in the field, pitchers who miss bats, power pitchers, those teams win in the playoffs, and that is the Chicago Cubs. But all that does is stack the deck in your favor. If you go to Vegas and you count cards with a whole group of guys, you can be counting cards with card sharks for a month, and the casino will still clear you out, because all it means is you tip the scales 51% in your favor. That doesn't mean you necessarily win. It's the same thing in baseball. The Cubs should be the odds-on favorite. They are the best team in baseball. That does not mean they win the World Series. Not this far out, not when you have 2 rounds of baseball still to play.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. They're the favorites for a reason, because they were the best team in Major League Baseball all year long. Toronto was incredibly impressive. I did not expect them to sweep the Texas Rangers. I certainly didn't expect the Indians to smoke the Red Sox. That happened as well. The Dodgers and the Nationals are panning out to be exactly what I thought they would be. But once again, Kershaw pitches deep, and I think that his staying power, his stamina, I'm not sure that's going to last.
Short rest.
But more so than anything else, the Cubs beating the San Francisco Giants, a team that had won the World Series in 3 of the last 5 years, 2012, 2010, 2012, 2014. It was supposed to be 2016. It didn't happen. But think about Bochy, rather. Look at what he did. 5 different relievers in the 9th inning after Matt Moore came out there, pitched sensational baseball. Somehow, some way, the Cubs hung around. Chris Bryant getting a single. Zobrist driving in an RBI. Baez finishing the deal. Aroldis Chapman coming in and closing with the kind of heat that he closed. I remember watching Game 1. I thought that same. I was like, what is Madden doing? Leave Lester in there, because Aroldis Chapman is scaring me. You know, I don't know about him right now, but let me tell you something. He ended up closing the deal in Game 1, and boy, did he close out the deal last night, striking out the side, throwing 102 miles an hour. When you look at the Chicago Cubs, they've got youth, they've got athleticism, they've got big bats in Bryant and Rizzo and others, okay? They've got defense, they've got pitching, they've got a manager extraordinaire in Joe Madden. Theo Epstein is the real deal. And this is without Arrieta being at his best. Let's keep that in mind. And so I look at it from that perspective. I'm taking the Cubs over the field. If there was ever
Is the curse over?
And I believe it is. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why I picked them coming into this postseason. I just got the sense that this is it. And more importantly, them beating San Francisco. If it were anybody else, Max, I would not make such a big deal of it. But to go up against the Bumgarners of the world, the Posies of the world, and others, and to find a way to still come out on top, overcoming a 3-run deficit in the 9th inning, pulling it out the way that they did, I do believe it's gotten to a point where we need to look at destiny's ride flowing in Chicago's direction.
And if there was a moment for that, because the most dangerous series, even if you're the best team, is the shorter series. You know, the fewer games you play, the more you get, the lesser team can beat the better team.
Right.
You think about that 9th inning. And I don't know about the decision not to bring Matt Moore back in the game. I know he was at 120 pitches, but when he was going for his no-hitter in August, it's true, it's easy to second guess from where I'm sitting, but he was going for his no-hitter in August. He went up to 133 pitches, and he got the first 2 outs of the inning before he gave up the hit in the final at-bat. If there's a time to ride a starter now and let him pitch,
but didn't he throw 120 pitches?
He had 120. It was 120, but in the
Max.
previous inning, he'd struck out 2 guys, including the last guy he faced, and the San Francisco bullpen is notoriously bad. I think if the curse was broken, I think it happened on Zobrist's RBI. Because at that point, you thought nobody out, a double, run in, now it's a 2-run game. And you think
agree with me?
And you think about the alternative. If they would have lost that game, they have to go and face San Francisco in a Game 5 where San Francisco's greatest weakness, their bullpen, is addressed by their greatest strength, Bumgarner. That was, if the Cubs go on to win it, I would say the curse was broken on that Zobrist base hit as much as anything else.
Well, then it happened, Max.
No,
so
I don't think you can say they're taking against the field.
Zobrist drove in the RBI. You said if the curse is broken, right? You wanted to sit up there and enlighten us with your baseball brilliance, and you do know your baseball, but you wanted to take a moment to enlighten us with your baseball brilliance, and all the while, all you did was make my case stronger. Because Zobrist did drive it, hit an RBI, you know, and then Baez did hit the game winner, and then Aroldis Chapman did come in and shut him down and close the deal. So it seems to me that everything that you just took the time to enunciate and explain so thoroughly and beautifully and eloquently, I might add. It seems to me that you're making my point in order to take, in terms of taking the Cubs instead of the field.
No, I'm saying if they win over the field, I'll look to that moment as a pivotal, maybe curse-breaking moment. However, I would caution you.
And I'm saying it is.
I would caution you that even though the Cubs are the best team on paper and in fact throughout the course of the season, I remember a Seattle Mariners team won 116 games and lost in the postseason to the Yankees. I remember a Yankees team that seemed like it was destined to win the World Series in 01. And ran into some hot pitchers who were great pitchers in Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling and lost in 01.
That ain't the case you just made. You made my case.
The best team, who also seems like the team of destiny, can still lose if they run into some hot starting pitching, which could easily happen.
So in other words, they could, but at the same time, you understand where I'm coming from when I'm telling you the curse is broken.
Well,
just admit it.
The curse is broken.
Just admit it. That's all.
I will look to that moment.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard to admit once again. Stephen A. I mean, he's just a prophet. He's right. I understand it's hard, Max, but come to the light. Come to the light.
By the way, time will tell. Either the Cubs will win and you'll be right, or the field will win and you'll be wrong and I'll be right.
Oh, Lord.
Feisty today. Speaking of that, two of my favorites coming up, Martellus and Michael Bennett. They're hilarious. And they do not hold back in their E60 interview. They go in on Jay Cutler. No, they do not. Stephen A., Roger Goodell, even the NCAA. Don't miss that conversation next.
So our next guest gets cheered and booed almost as loudly as the teams he covers. You can watch him inform and infuriate on First Take every morning on ESPN2. Please say hello to Stephen A. Smith.
There's a lot of people. I mean, they really, really care. They want to be liked. My guy, Max Kellerman, he loves to be liked. I don't particularly care. I'm the youngest of 6. I was raised by 4 wonderful sisters and the greatest mama in the world, but I call them wonderful now. Growing up throughout my life, Jimmy, they were cruel to me.
They were cruel to you. Do they watch your show every day?
Did you just ask me, do they watch my show? Do they watch the show? They might as well produce the show. They send texts during every show. Say this, say that. Don't say this. Don't be cruel. Moms are watching.
Oh, I love it. His sisters produced the show. Stephen A. informs and infuriates. That was obviously him on Jimmy Kimmel last night. How'd it go?
Well, I'm told that it was excellent. It was spectacular, superb.
From your sisters?
Those are words that were conveyed to me. I'll go with that. I'll take that.
By text message from Mama and your sisters?
No. My sisters have all said. My sister Linda texted me last night and said, "You're a dead man." That's exactly what she said. So my sisters, and my other sister Carmen, she was planning on cooking me because my birthday's tomorrow, and she was planning on cooking me some lasagna. She's planning on cooking me some lasagna. Well, that's out the window now. So I've kind of ticked off my family, but I'm Stephen A., baby.
Well,
I'll work it out. I'll get them back in the saddle.
Can I tell you
two
things? First, better television than perhaps watching Stephen A. on Jimmy Kimmel is watching Stephen A. watch himself on Jimmy Kimmel. As he suppresses that smile best he can, keeping the corners of his mouth down because it just pleases you so much, Stephen A. Second, that's a heck of a West Indian accent you do. I mean, I watched last night. I mean, granted, I know you grew up with a mom from the area, but I didn't know that just came baked in, that you can do the accent as well. That was impressive.
You know, listen, just like you remember Eddie Murphy doing that stand-up, you just go, hey, what a beautiful woman like you doing crying in the aisle of love. You know, listen, I got West Indian in my blood, man. I can do it. But listen, I had a ball. Jimmy Kimmel's fantastic. They all treated me great. It was a great, great experience. And they say they're going to want me to come back, so I'm looking forward to that as well. I had a ball. I really did.
I'm sure they will. You were fantastic, as always. You know who else is? Will, good to have you. Did I introduce you yet?
No, we just kind of jumped in and hit the ground running.
Thank you for being with us. All right. The Bennett brothers, Martellus and Michael, sat down with ESPN, the magazine's Mina Kimes, for an E60 piece. That's going to air tonight at 8 on ESPN in typical Bennett fashion. They didn't hold back and were as entertaining and as engaging as ever. Check it out.
Witten didn't talk to me when I was in Dallas. He didn't help me. Very rarely did we talk. I hated him. I hated with him.
I don't think Roger Goodell doing a good job. He can find me, say what you want him to say, but doesn't do anything to put his body in any harm. But yet, he gets to make every decision. Congratulations, NFLPA.
Some people that you want to be a leader is not the guy that's the leader. And everyone in the locker room knows that this is not the leader, but this is what you want the face of the team to look like.
Hell yeah, college players should get paid. NCAA gets paid, Rose Bowl gets paid, everybody gets paid but the people that's making a product. In some countries, they call that slavery.
We just had a bunch of on the roster. That's why we didn't win games. And coaches like the
So love it or hate it, they speak honestly and freely, as always. Stephen A., I want to start with you here. Yeah, do you like the comments?
Say before, but first things first. My birthday's Friday. Damn it, I'm here thinking it's Thursday, so I apologize to everybody for missing.
Don't worry, we know about your birthday. You just be in studio, okay?
But I will be there.
Okay,
I will be there.
we know.
Absolutely.
We're prepared.
Kevin Hart is coming in studio on my birthday. How the hell am I going to miss that? But I will say this, getting back to the Bennett brothers, their comments, I have mixed emotions about it. The things that they say are not necessarily false. Particularly with Martellus, I definitely respect his openness. Him talking about Jason Witten and how Jason Witten wasn't helpful. Him calling a bunch of his teammates the B word. Because, well, I have to admit, on occasion, particularly with Jay Cutler being quarterback for them, I'm not going to call them that, but they didn't look good. Let's just leave it at that for PC purposes on a Walt Disney platform. They didn't look good, all right? With that being said, I am sort of getting to the point where I'm seeing the Bennett brothers, particularly Michael, just talking a little bit too much and asking myself, what's the gain here? Where's this going to get you? At some point in time, particularly with Michael Bennett, who was whining about not getting the money he thought he deserved, they're going to ask whether or not you're worth, your mouth worth the money that you covet. Your game is not just the only thing that's taken into consideration. And by the way, that's just not about him. That's about me. That's about other people. I'm quite sure this company from time to time asks themselves, am I worth the headache that I could be? My answer is an emphatic yes. But nevertheless, it is a question that obviously gets asked from time to time throughout my career because I'm going to speak my mind. But look at the platform and the medium that I'm in. If I were a professional athlete whose game had to speak for him, as opposed to me, where talking is my profession, that would be entirely different. I just think that Michael Bennett is getting in his own way. I think some of the things that he's done are counterproductive. In the case of Martellus, I feel less so in that fashion, particularly because I feel sorry for him because of the years of frustration he was subjected to, first by being a Dallas Cowboy, okay, and then secondly, by having to play with Jay Cutler. Talk about people that have been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. It would be Martellus Bennett. So I have a little bit more sympathy for him than I do for Michael. But I do find myself asking the question, are they getting in their own way? And I think we all need to ask ourselves those questions from time to time in our lives and in our careers. And I think Michael and Martellus, more so Michael than Martellus, is getting to that point right now.
I like these guys because they say what's on their mind, usually, especially Michael. But this time, Michael, as you said, Stephen A., he's saying stuff that's not necessarily untrue, but he's not breaking new ground. Yeah, no kidding. College athletes are exploited. Yeah, a lot of people don't like Goodell, although the fact that he doesn't play football, how can the commissioner play football and then be commissioner of the league? He's not breaking new ground, but what he's saying to me is uncontroversial. Martellus here is the guy who made news because he used Witten's name. He said he hated Jason Witten. To me, that's news. One of the best tight ends in football at the moment is Martellus Bennett, and he's talking about one of the great tight ends I've seen, Jason Witten, who's considered this team player, but he's saying really wasn't helpful. He put his own, it sounds like he's saying Jason Witten put his own interests as a player ahead of the team, which is not Jason Witten's reputation, by the way. And then he used the word he used to describe the Chicago Bears, which is going to make its rounds, obviously, in the media and in NFL locker rooms, especially the Bears. That, to me, is actually newsworthy. He's actually saying new stuff here. And by the way, Martellus Bennett went from, he was on the Giants not that long ago, B-plus tight end, who wanted to get paid like an A-plus, I always thought, to a guy who, on the Patriots, sure looks like an A-plus so far.
Yeah, Stephen A. says we all have to ask ourselves this question, whether or not they're getting in their own way. I think we all also know the answer. The answer is yes, Stephen A. They're getting in their own way. Here's the thing. This was based on a profile. It's an E60 piece coming out tonight. It was based on a profile as well by Mina Kimes in ESPN, the magazine. Great profile, these two guys. There's a line in the profile where they addressed J.J. Watt, and they said everybody loves J.J. Watt, but nobody really likes J.J. Watt. Well, that's kind of how I feel about the Bennett brothers. How do you like these guys coming out of this? See, the thing is, they get this reputation that they're the truth tellers, tell it like it is, ultimate in authenticity. That's not what I hear. I hear guys that sound kind of contrived. The purpose, what the end game is, Stephen A., is to get attention. They're saying anything to get attention, and that would be fine if it was benign, like telling a diner at a restaurant to wrap it up randomly. Some dude just sitting around, wrap it up, wear a condom, giving out free advice, telling another guy, I don't eat American chocolates. That's Michael saying, I don't eat American chocolates. Random, odd quotes and sayings and anything to get attention. That's benign and somewhat harmless, but it's transparent as well. You're just getting people to look at you. But then going in on guys like Jason Witten, Max, it's not just one of the best tight ends you've seen in your time. He's a Hall of Fame tight end. Huh. He has a pristine reputation. On one side of the ledger is everyone Jason Witten's ever played with, and on the other is Martellus Bennett, a guy who couldn't beat him out, who had to leave those Dallas Cowboys, Stephen A., that was so tough. Oh, yeah, such a tough situation because he couldn't beat out Jason Witten, who threw Jay Cutler under the bus, by the way, the only guy who's ever produced a Pro Bowl season for Martellus Bennett, and called an entire team the B word.
This is the only guy for long who gave him a Pro Bowl season.
These are guys that just want attention, Stephen A. That's all it is, and that's not authentic.
You said something that I want to put you on pause about. First of all, when you talk about Jason Witten, I do think Jason Witten is class personified. I had the pleasure of meeting him and interviewing him at Super Bowl week when we did our radio show out there for Sirius XM. And Jason Witten is class personified, and he is a future Hall of Famer. I believe that the Bennett brothers are truth tellers. I don't believe that they're people that are just looking for attention. I do believe that they speak what's on their mind, that they're honest and authentic in that regard. Maybe there are some things they shouldn't say and some things they shouldn't be so open about, but I do believe they're being open and they're honest. You ask them a question, they're going to give you an answer. But in the case of Jason Witten, here's the problem with what you're saying, Will, and I'm not faulting Jason Witten for this at all. Jason Witten wasn't very helpful to Martellus Bennett, according to Martellus Bennett. Fair enough. Martellus Bennett is a tight end. So is Jason Witten. As far as Jason Witten is concerned, you coming there trying to take his job. He ain't having that. I don't blame him one bit. But the problem is, because Jason Witten is so revered by the Fourth Estate, which happens to be us, it can build resentment towards those on the come up because he's given this imagery of being such a pristine individual, so above reproach, never somebody that engages in a kind of frivolity or pettiness, or dare we say, unethical sort of competitiveness per se. I'm not saying that's him here. I'm saying if you're Martellus Bennett, you have every right to assume that and feel a bit chagrined over it because you're looking at it and saying, he's got this image, y'all don't even know the half of it.
Yeah,
so I do understand where Martellus is coming from in that regard,
but
and I think that needs to be said.
Yes, and that's if Martellus Bennett is accurate and true. We should hear from James Hanna, Gavin Escobar, all the other tight ends that couldn't beat Jason Witten. Now, what do they think of Jason Witten?
But none of them are.
Do they have a similar
opinion?
None of them are Martellus Bennett. Martellus Bennett, you can see right now, might be the best tight end in football so far this season. He's having an awesome season, partly because he's on an awesome franchise, but also because he's very talented. He's never been not good. So it's a little unfair to compare him to other tight ends who didn't beat out Jason Witten.
Max, they're not talking,
because the idea could be, why didn't Jason Witten take me under his wing and help me to help the team? That seems to be the point.
You're not talking about just the performance. What I'm saying, Will, is this. Will is speaking to those players that also competed against Jason Witten for his spot, how do they feel about him from an emotional perspective?
Right.
Will, what I would say to you is that Jason Witten may not have vibed with Martellus Bennett the way he vibed with them.
And that's pretty easy. That's just a personality clash. Hold on, Max. I just want to. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that the Bennett brothers are liars. I'm not saying that everything they say is simply false and attention-seeking. There can be things they say that I think are true, that I agree with. I agreed, Max, about the NCAA. I agree with Michael Bennett on that. But what you get the impression from the Bennett brothers is this, and this was in Mina Kimes' piece as well. You begin to feel like an audience member. Every time you're around the Bennett brothers, you're not really with the Bennett brothers. You're not really having a conversation. You're just an audience member for whatever punchline or witticism or attention-seeking opinion they might have. And in the end, I just don't think I love guys like that. I know guys like that. That's not my kind of guy.
There's an E60 special on them because that is consumable. That's sellable. The media desires it because the presumption is there's an audience for this. And so that may be like a feedback loop where they then give you more of the performance because it sells and builds their brand. All that may be true. And I don't think that Michael said much that we don't already know. I mean, I don't think it was untruthful, but yeah, okay, I get it. I agree with most of what he said. But Martellus did make news with the Witten stuff. And to your point about how it's like, well, it's just him seeking attention, I don't think Witten was ever threatened by another tight end. Like he must have been in terms of competition with Bennett. I think that's a safe presumption to make and assumption to make. And Bennett is giving us information here. We can do with it what we wish, but he's saying, look, when it came to a guy who may have been a threat to Witten, he wasn't exactly being helpful to me. That's new information.
I'll just add this on. Martellus Bennett's been in 4 locker rooms in 6 years, right? Changed teams 4 times. 2 of those locker rooms right now. It doesn't seem like he fit in very well. Is it those locker rooms? Is it the Cowboys and Bears? Or is it Martellus Bennett?
Well, I mean, my retort to that would be you don't know the answer.
That's fair.
That's right. And in fairness to you, I don't know the answer either. Neither does Max or anybody else. But if you're sitting in his shoes, one of the things you have to pay attention to, Will, is preferential treatment. There is no question that preferential treatment gets accorded to Jason Witten. Now, he may deserve it.
Right, he's Hall of Fame.
Wait a minute. He may deserve it because of his credentials. But you know what? Some would argue T.O. deserved it because of what he produced on the field. The flip side is that he didn't have the same personality. We all know that Jason Witten, in concert with Tony Romo, facilitated the exodus of Terrell Owens from Dallas because, Jerry Jones once committed to keeping T.O. and then in a matter of days changed his mind, or purportedly after having conversations with some of these dudes. So if you know this backdrop, you have to take that into consideration. You don't get to sit there because you're a Dallas Cowboy fan and you respect the hell out of Jason Witten, and rightfully so, and all of this stuff, and just gloss over those realities and how it could potentially impact somebody like a Martellus Bennett. Because Martellus Bennett can play. He is no scrub. He shows up to work. He comes to produce. And what he said was, he never said Jason Witten couldn't play. He never said Jason Witten wasn't a professional. He never said that Jason Witten wasn't a future Hall of Famer. He basically said Jason Witten treated me like crap. That's basically what he said. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know if any of us is qualified to dismiss that.
I think if I were in the league, I'd rather have my locker next to Jason Witten than Martellus Bennett, based upon everything we know.
Well, except like take T.O. for an example. They run him out of town. He immediately goes to a Super Bowl, and he's the best player on the field in the Super Bowl. That's not Jason Witten or Tony Romo. So
that's
just
fair,
because,
Max.
And the point is that sometimes the media chooses its darlings. And I agree with you, Jason Witten, for very good reason, is a media, like everyone likes him because he's such a great player and he has a sterling reputation as a teammate. That's why this is news.
Right.
It's T.O. going to the Super Bowl and balling out, who's not the media darling, and now it's Martellus Bennett on the Patriots and balling out, who is not at least beloved by the media, even if we pay attention to him.
Before we go to break, I just want to piggyback on what Stephen A. said earlier, because you were saying you don't see how people could see them as likable and they're not real. I've spent quite a bit of time around them. I was with them for the NFL draft in 2015 when I was with NFL Network, and I promise you, they are as real as they come, and it's authentic. It's just that they're not seeking attention. It's that they're speaking freely. They actually say something, unlike most players in the NFL. So, of course, they're going to garner attention. They're creative. I see you giving me the side.
No,
they're creative.
You've been around them. My perception is through these profile pieces and what I read. And I will totally respect your personal experience and what you can tell me there.
And they can have a conversation and not be an audience member.
That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. Everybody can't be in front of them. Molly, your point is valid, but everybody hasn't met them. Everybody can't be in front of them. Will, I get totally where you're coming from, and I respect it. All I'm saying is, based just on that alone, you're still wrong, because in the end, Martellus Bennett has a right to sit up there and say, excuse me, my personal experience with this dude is something that's been glossed over.
And speaking of the fourth estate, the filter through which you're perceiving it, which is legitimate, and this is maybe how it's being received by many, is our filter. And our filter is exploiting their personalities, obviously, for our gain, and they're using it, but maybe that filter is presenting them in a way that doesn't seem authentic.
Great conversation.
So maybe we just need to, like, set a beer date. Like, I'll get to hang out with the Bennett brothers, find out.
No, it's all
good. We play dominoes,
I
we
just
play
felt
42. I like Moon.
I to speak to my personal experience being around them, because I'm here on the show. Coming up next, Greg Hardy's NFL playing days. A day after former NFL defensive end Greg Hardy released a statement saying he's excited to start his MMA career, Jay Glazer, a Fox Sports NFL insider with a prominent MMA presence, has taken a strong stance against Hardy's pursuits. I would be incredibly disappointed in any of my fellow MMA coaches and any promoters if they took Greg Hardy in and taught him a shred of our incredible sport. Many of us train women in self-defense specifically to help protect them versus domestic violence. Me and all my coaches at my gym do and take great pride in that. Competing in any sport is a privilege. Greg Hardy should not be granted that privilege. There are many beautiful arts taught in our sport, none of which should be afforded to him. Stephen A., do you agree with Jay Glazer?
1,000% I agree with Jay Glazer. In the interest of full disclosure, we don't see each other much, but Jay Glazer is my friend. I love this brother dearly. He is a good man. He always has been, and he's one of the best reporters this business has ever seen. I don't give a damn that he's worked for the other network. He and I go back to our days when he was at the New York Post, and I was at the New York Daily News as a high school sports writer. That's how far back Jay Glazer and I go. He's a special dude, and I know how much the sport of MMA means to him. He was there from the ground up when it was starving for recognition and credibility. He was in it, and he's been in it to win it from day one. Now, Max, Will, Molly, y'all remember my point about Greg Hardy yesterday. Without having spoken to Jay Glazer, because I haven't seen him in a while, without knowing his position, what was my number one concern, Max? What did I say? I said fear was my number one reaction, because this dude who seems undisciplined and unable to control himself and his emotions, okay, on the football field and evidently beyond, if you believe the bench judge that convicted him of assault after allegedly, I shouldn't say allegedly, damn it, he got convicted, throwing his girlfriend on a futon bed filled with rifles, slamming her arm down with a toilet bowl, grabbing her by the neck, threatening to kill her, even though he categorically denied it. He was found guilty by a judge during a bench trial. He appealed the decision in the state of North Carolina. You're allowed to appeal it and take it to a jury trial, at which time the woman that was the victim in all of this did not want to testify again and under oath. She didn't want to go through all of that, and ultimately the case was dropped. I said yesterday, fear was my number one reaction, because when you're talking about MMA, you're talking about requisite skills that you are taught that will make you even more of a lethal weapon. He's lethal enough being 6'4", 279 pounds, with the athleticism and the physical prowess that he already possesses. But now, to go to the MMA and to learn the requisite skills even more so would make him that much more dangerous. That essentially is what Jay Glazer alluded to with his statement. He is 1,000% correct. He is absolutely qualified, more so than anyone in this country as far as I'm concerned, because not only is he involved with the MMA, with his own gym and everything else, training athletes as well, but he's also an insider on the NFL. So he knows stuff about Greg Hardy most of us don't know. I would say I can't think of any individual more qualified than my man Jay Glazer to say what he said about Greg Hardy. I support him 1,000%. He is absolutely right.
So, I disagree.
Okay.
It's interesting when you speak for a living, when you do public speaking, one of the lessons you learn is people mostly just remember the first thing you say. And then whatever you have to back it up or to nuance it or caveat, good luck with that, because they hear the first. So this is what I want to start with. I grew up in Texas. There was a little bit of a chivalristic code in the way I grew up. And one of those things, beyond being hold the door for women, tell the truth, be honest, was never, ever, ever lay your hands on a woman.
Yep.
That's how I was raised, and that's what I believe. That's what I
Same
believe
here.
when this segment is over. That's what I believe when I went into it. But my main goal in this conversation isn't to prove I'm more against domestic violence than the next guy. And that's not my goal in any of our conversations. By the way, Stephen A., you and I have had race conversations. It's not my goal to come out of a segment having proven to everybody that I'm not a racist. I'm not.
Absolutely.
I don't need to prove
We've talked about that. We've talked about that.
Right.
You're absolutely correct.
So my
Absolutely.
goal is let's get to what's interesting, what's thoughtful, what's smart. And here's the question when it comes to Greg Hardy and whether or not he should be allowed to participate in MMA, Max, is I also believe in second chances. President Obama on his ESPN town hall talked about this last night. I believe in it philosophically. I believe legally we have a debate about felons being more reintegrated into society and finding a place for them to be productive. So I come at this place where I'm like, well, what should Greg Hardy be exiled from? He shouldn't play football, according to many. He shouldn't be in MMA. What exactly is he allowed to participate in? Can he be in architecture? That's an art. Can he be a bricklayer? How many industries exile Greg Hardy for? And this is the other hairy thing, and you brought it up, Stephen A. He's legally not guilty. The legal system doesn't work like football. He's not 1-1. You know, in the end, after the appeal, he's not guilty. It doesn't mean he's innocent. I know the difference between innocent and not guilty. But if a guy's not guilty, but we all kind of live in this world, we're like, but we know, right? Then how do we apply that standard to a chosen profession for a man? How do we start saying you can't be this? You're exiled from this part of society. You can't be here. You can't do this. Based upon, right now, technically not guilty and philosophically not offering second chances, what are we telling people like Greg Hardy? Goodbye? Get away from society? We don't have there's a special realm for you that I don't know exists yet?
I'll respond after Max.
I think that's those are all legitimate questions. Let me start with the first one. To Stephen A's point, Jay Glazer is uniquely positioned here as the hardest working guy in the business. Probably his guy is a tireless worker, really good guy. I've also known him for many years, though probably not as well as Stephen A does, but is also knows all about the NFL, knows all about MMA. And to answer the first question, what kind of occupations do people feel like maybe should have some sanctions against Greg Hardy or should have high barriers of entry? One of them might be fighting, you know, learning to use your body in ever more damaging and deadly ways. That may be one of them.
But even if that were true, even if that were true, Max, wouldn't it be a little bit of a hurdle, the fact that he's technically not guilty?
I want to go through that next, and then there's one last thing. We shouldn't have to publicly relitigate evidentiary standards every time something like this comes up. Let me explain what that means. Just because someone's accused of a serious crime, even if that crime is difficult to prove or they had just a good defense or the plaintiff didn't have a strong enough case, we shouldn't have to relitigate publicly, in other words, all decide again what constitutes guilt.
Right.
There is a legal system, to your point, in place that works very well. Nothing's perfect, but it works better than everything else, right? And you said that you know the difference between not guilty and innocent. They're two different things. But he was not found guilty. He is not, you know.
That's right.
Okay. So the question is, should he be shunned?
Right.
In the case of, now this gets to an MMA question. In the case of individuals, promoters, who run businesses, I don't have a problem if they in good conscience sit down and say, okay, do I think it's the morally upright thing to do to be in business with this person? And if they say yes, they review it and say yes, okay, that's their decision and they should go forward. And if they say no, don't, I think that's also fine for them, particularly in this industry, a fighting industry, considering the amount of evidence against Greg Hardy. And even though he's not guilty, we all see, I think many people see that there was stuff going on. Okay. That's not the way business works, though. business generally is an amoral decision-making process. Not immoral, they're bad guys, but amoral. Morality doesn't usually is not the animating force in business. Making money is the animating force in business, and that's why I think it is fair if people like Jay Glazer say, okay, I'm in a media platform, I know both businesses, I have an idea about what's going on, and
yes,
they're making
Stephen A.,
a business
I'd like to after
decision,
you as well.
and I need to voice the moral concern.
Will, perhaps this is a rhetorical question, but I did mention that he was convicted by the judge during a bench trial, correct?
Right. Yes.
I mentioned that, right?
Yes.
If I remember correctly, that's a felon. That's a felony. And if you're convicted, I'm not sure you're allowed to carry a weapon if you're a convicted felon, which is what happened. Now, the case may have been overturned or whatever the case may be, but ultimately a bench judge convicted Greg Hardy. If you are convicted, why should somebody turn around and train you to hurt people? Now, listen, we're not saying, I've never, for the record, Will, I have never once said that Greg Hardy should not be back in the NFL. If the rules allow it, this is your profession, you earn a living playing football, that's what you do. But MMA is a different sport, which essentially gives you the license to assault people in the octagon. But the requisite skills it teaches you are applicable outside of the octagon. And when you take that into consideration and you listen to the source of this opinion, which is Jay Glazer, and you take all of those things into consideration, I don't think it's something that's easily ignored. I applaud your position, Will, when you talk about the land of second chances, because I religiously say that about the United States of America. We're supposed to be the land of second chances. But at the same time, that's after you suffered consequences the first go round. And a lot of people will lament to you that Greg Hardy really didn't suffer. He didn't do any jail time. He didn't lose the money he was supposed to lose, because even when he was suspended for 10 games, that got reduced to 4 because retroactively it was ruled that Roger Goodell couldn't impose the kind of stiff punishment that he wanted to impose against Greg Hardy. Obviously, he became a member of the Dallas Cowboys. And so when you look at it from that perspective, there is something to speak about as it pertains to his punishment or lack thereof. And therefore, when you're talking about a second chance, as far as they're concerned, he wasn't denied the first chance.
Well, and I would point out, by the way, he's on his third or fourth chance at this point, right? He's not just on his second chance. And I know this has to be I know this has to be repeated over and over. If Greg Hardy is guilty of everything he's accused of, he's a bad person. I don't want to be on Greg Hardy's side. I don't want to defend him. But I see difficult questions that most, and many in the media, not Jay Glazer, not Stephen A. Smith, not Max Kellerman, don't want to get to, which is, how do you define a standard of guilt? What occupations do you exile from somebody from with what kind of standard for guilt? And most of the media, again, not Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, or Jay Glazer, I don't know Jay Glazer, simply want to use these platforms to prove how virtuous they are. That's the safe thing to do, to always prove you're against domestic violence. Why don't you get to some difficult questions, because these are hard to answer right here.
Real quick, can I just say something? So I covered the UFC for a long time, for 7 years. No, Jay Glazer, worked with him. And I spoke to Rashad Evans, former light heavyweight champ, before the show. He'll fight middleweight 205. And he said, this is where I get what you're saying for second chances, right? So if it was any other sport, and basically what Rashad said is, knowing how to fight like we do is such a huge responsibility. And if someone who trains MMA has a very bad temper, that can be very dangerous. And if he doesn't have the ability to think before he acts, that he could definitely hurt someone in this sport. So that's someone who's fighting right now, and that's his concern.
I know we have to leave. Can I just say this? It's a little bit of a hard turn tonally. So Stephen A. Smith had his big moment last night on Jimmy Kimmel. Mine's today. Did you know this? I'm filling in on some radio show.
I know.
Like the Stefan A. Smith show. I don't know. It's some...
Yo, you better watch your mouth. You ain't doing it yet. You better pronounce my name accurately and appropriately before you miss out on this opportunity. Will Kane is filling in for me today while I fly back to the East Coast on my radio show, and they got the nerve to joke around with my name. You want to get yourself canceled?
Yes, just to
before
start.
You even
That's
start.
To start. 2 hours in your house. You have no idea the kind of damage I'm going to do today.
Well, keep in mind that it wasn't like somebody called up and said, hey, Will, it was Stephen A. that said, called Will.
I know.
Remember that.
I know.
Be thankful.
I know where it came
grateful,
from. I am.
Watch your mouth.
I am.
All right.
Stephen A. show in
Proper
very,
fealty.
in very good hands. Will, thank you so much for being with us.
You bet.
We'll check you later, 1 to 3. Up next, you know the old saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you really have none. So why is Jerry Jones saying the Cowboys have a miracle problem with their two guys? We'll break it down next.
It's a miracle problem to have in my mind, and I'm so proud because every time Dak takes a snap, I see our future getting stronger. I see the encouragement that his future brings to this team. I see what he's doing right now, his presence on that particular series or that particular down. All of that is there, and then I look over there, and in my mind, someone that is very capable of winning it all.
So normally we say if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. But, of course, this instance is very different, Max, and in Jerry's world as well. Do you agree with him that this is a miracle problem to have?
First, let me say, because we're on the subject of the Cowboys, I said a couple segments ago that T.O. went from the Cowboys to the Eagles and went to the Super Bowl. Obviously, he was on the Eagles first and then the Cowboys. Second, of course, it's a great problem to have. Of course, it's a miracle problem to have. Most teams don't have a single, not most, many teams are looking for a single good quarterback. And the Cowboys have two, a veteran and a rookie. That's a great problem to have. But let me translate what Jerry Jones is really saying here, Stephen A. Smith. He's saying Max Kellerman was right. Right? Do you remember what I've been saying this whole time? Romo's job, because Jerry Jones kept saying it's Romo's job, it's Romo's job. I said, yeah, it should be Romo's job, unless Dak Prescott still only has one loss. The Cowboys are still sitting on one loss when Romo's ready to play. Then the history of the NFL has been, it doesn't matter if you're Kurt Warner, you can lose your job to injury. You can win it by injury, and you can lose it by injury. Mark Bulger's the hot hand, even if he's not as good as Kurt Warner on his best day. It's Bulger's team. Warner gets traded ultimately or has to leave St. Louis ultimately. That's the way it works. And what I really see Jerry Jones doing here is softening his position. His position was, when Romo's healthy, it's his job. Oh, but look, we still only have one loss. Well, maybe it's still Dak's job. We have to wait and see. That's what I see Jerry Jones saying here, Stephen A. Smith.
It doesn't matter to me what Jerry Jones is saying. I find them laughable because I find him laughable. And the reason why I find him laughable is because when I think about Jerry Jones, I think about a 73-year-old man that is 3 years removed from acknowledging that the clock is ticking on his life and that he's desperate to win and win now. And then he follows that up by talking about the future and how bright it is. Well, what has happened? What is he, Mork from Mork and Mindy, that show back from decades ago when Robin Williams, the late, great Robin Williams, the comedian, God rest his soul, used to sit up there and used to get younger as opposed to older? Who is that now? Jerry Jones? No, last time I checked, he's still getting older and older. And the Dallas Cowboys would need to understand that the clock is ticking. Do I think they're getting closer? Yes. I can't deny the fact that they're formidable. When you're led by two rookies who are playing outstanding football and you've got an elite offensive line, the best in football, there is no question that there's a tremendous upside and this team should be a contender for years and years to come. But Jerry Jones is still there. And what he's essentially saying to you, Max, is that he's the guy that can mess everything up. When I think about Jerry Jones, the owner, the president, the general manager for the Dallas Cowboys, just looking at his record here, his stellar record, I mean, he's 234 and 203. He's made the playoffs 13 times in 28 years. This is the Jerry Jones that we're talking about here, with a 14-10 record, who hasn't won a playoff, he's won 2 playoff games in 20 years. So when he sits up there and talks about the future being so bright, acting like he's got time, instead of appreciating the urgency of the moment, understanding that Dak Prescott is balling in such a fashion that it is a chemistry you may not want to disrupt, and somehow, some way, just days removed from sitting there and saying that Tony Romo is getting healthy and Tony Romo, when he can play, it's his job and that's it, case closed, to now talking about it's a miracle situation for him or anybody else to be in. It just shows me what the problem with the Dallas Cowboys is. They need an owner, a president, and a GM who knows how to be that and not try to be the coach. And that's not the case with Jerry Jones.
Well, Jerry
That
Jones,
is where your problem lies.
Jerry Jones, I think, learned recently that he couldn't exploit his wealth in a league with a hard cap. He couldn't exploit loopholes in the rules as he did with the Deion Sanders signing decades ago at this point, when he helps lead the charge for a salary cap and then gets around it.
He's just realizing that?
And then gets around it with the bonus structure and the way that prorates the bonus.
And that just happened? And that just happened?
Yeah. Yep. Eventually what happened was, and we've seen it in the last several years, is he's now trying to cash in, it looks a little bit to me, on his wisdom, on the fact that he's been around the game, and he finally realized a couple of years ago that he ain't good enough as a GM. He needs help, and he ceded control largely, or a big chunk of it, to Stephen Jones, who's made much sounder football decisions over the last several years than Jerry Jones had in the previous years. And I think now the Cowboys are reaping those rewards.
As it particularly, I'm not talking about his marketing brilliance, his business acumen, because that's not to be questioned. But strictly as it pertains to football, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Did you mention wisdom and Jerry Jones in the same sentence? Did you just do that?
Yes, but sometimes the wisdom is knowing, Stephen A., sometimes the wisdom is knowing what you don't know.
Oh,
and he finally figured out that he's not a good enough GM to do it by himself.
He's figured out what he doesn't know, huh?
Yep.
Jerry Jones, you willing to put your money on that? That Jerry Jones has figured out what he doesn't know.
I'm not putting my money on it.
Really?
I'm not putting my money on it.
So you just talking. You just talking. That's all it is.
No.
Jerry Jones and wisdom.
I finally see some signs of maturity from the septuagenarian, starting with Stephen Jones being allowed essentially to assert himself and saying things like...
What was that? Was that septuagenarian? Is that the word you used?
Yeah, 70-year-old.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure. Another word I haven't heard on first take.
I'm jealous of your vocabulary.
No, I got that. Just want to make sure. Okay, I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
The point is, remember when he wanted Johnny Manziel? And by the way, you don't even have to know that. Everyone just knows, knowing Jerry Jones. Johnny Manziel's available.
You and I both know.
He had to
it
be
was
drooling.
The alcohol. It was rumors of other issues why Jerry Jones was dissuaded.
No, it's because Stephen Jones put his body in front of it and drafted an offensive lineman who's worked out a little good.
And I'm telling you, it wouldn't have happened if Johnny Manziel was coming out of Texas A&M clean. Jerry Jones would have overruled his son. That's what I'm saying.
Stephen Jones has been running the show much, much more in recent years than he ever had, and maybe more than Jerry. And it's paying dividends for them now.
Really? It's paying dividends?
Yeah.
Now? Oh, now. Oh, okay, good. Not the last 20 years. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? One good season in the last decade.
Stephen Jones increasing control is not that old.
It.
It's over the last several years. That's how long it takes to put a team together. And apparently they've been put together.
Like I said, you're very understanding. With you, no one get fired. I mean, everybody have a job in the perpetuity because, after all, it takes time. It takes time. Everything takes time. Coordinators, coaches, players, everything takes time in the world of Max Kellerman. Yeah. Everybody would have a job.
Stephen A. Smith, no one would be employed. You fire everybody.
You're right. You're right. I damn sure would. I damn sure would. I'd be the first to tell you.
All right. You know who might have more issues? The Giants than the Cowboys. I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's true. A lot of issues. Cowboys... doing well. The Giants haven't been at their best this season, and Eli Manning is taking blame, but are all the struggles their fault? We will get into it.
I hopped on a plane. I said, I got a priority. I need to be on the table at first take. I don't care where you're from, what language you speak. You know what you get? Kevin Hart.
Talking about he gonna take my job.
Oh, let me tell you how I do it. I'll find time to come here and do what you do better.
I sit in my bed and watch you guys talk about nothing.
What you do is assume. That's your problem.
I've never seen somebody that's wrong so much.
We joke, we play around. If I don't talk about you, I don't like you. Okay? But I love you.
I love the way he said I love you. Don't miss First Take this Friday when comedian and actor Kevin Hart will be here in studio. Always fireworks when he's on the show. You don't want to miss that.
Usain Bolt motivator, apparently.
I know. Can you believe that? With his workouts on Snapchat. Check those out. Meanwhile, after getting off to a 2-0 start, the Giants have lost 3 games in a row and are currently last in the NFC East. Maybe they need to watch some Kevin Hart workouts. In the last 3 games, Manning has 2 touchdowns, 4 turnovers, and 5 sacks, something Eli addressed on Tuesday, saying, I didn't play as well as I needed to last week, missed some throws. I've got to play better, make some more throws, better decisions, can't turn the ball over. Max, you pay very close attention to this organization and team. Is Eli to blame at this point for the Giants' struggles?
He's one of the people to blame. Absolutely, yes. And a lot of years when Eli throws a lot of interceptions, he's actually not the guy to blame. When you go over the tape and everything and go, no, that's a blown route. That's Gilbride a couple years ago. That's a complex tree, route tree, and guy's not where he's supposed to be, and the offensive line didn't. But this year, in spite of the 64% completion percentage that he's putting up, I see an okay quarterback so far. I see a guy who's fine. He's a standard issue NFL quarterback, but that's not what he's paid to do. Eli is paid to be outstanding. And if we got outstanding quarterback play, I am a Giants fan. If the Giants got
a former Giant. Antonio, by the way, I didn't introduce you. I'm sorry.
Antonio, the great Antonio Pierce.
Yeah.
Very indebted to him.
Take the
play for my Giants. If the Giants had outstanding quarterback play, they win the Washington game, and they win the Packers game. Not even amazing quarterback, just better than your average quarterback. They're 4-1 right now. That's what Eli is there to do, especially with Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, and Victor Cruz. I know they have issues in the running game, lots of injuries, and the O-line is porous. Here is my levels of blame. I blame number one, Jerry Reese. They've struck out too often in the draft. The philosophy seems to be draft team captains. Don't worry if they're talented. And then when they take a risk with a guy like Eric Flowers, who's very young, there's plenty of time, but so far no good. Number two, you got to say McAdoo. The team, when it was going well, they've shown discipline. All of a sudden, it starts to go bad, and 3 games now, no discipline. And number three, Eli Manning. I put him right after the GM and the head coach in terms of the blame chart, but he's on it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the picture, right, when Eli and the Giants are playing well, it's beautiful to watch. But when he's playing bad, it's some ugly football now. It's ugly football to watch. And Eli, for the most part, has always had an outstanding supporting cast, right? You go back to when I was there, the Plaxico, the Monty Toomers, Tiki Barbers, Brandon Jacobs, a running game like that. Great offensive line at that time. Well, now he's not. He has a young offensive line, right? They're trying to mix and match different guys and put them in a position. And then each and every week now for the last month or so, it seems like, they've had to deal with questions in the locker room about a teammate. We've addressed that enough. It seems like to me that Eli is pressing a little bit too much. There's opportunities down the field. And, again, you talked about the completion. The reason that's happening is because he's not throwing the ball down the field. You're talking about short and intermediate routes. When the ball's going down the field, they're not connecting. And for some odd reason, strangely enough, him and Odell Beckham don't seem like they're on the same page this year. There's a lot of times in the game, either Odell's open, he's overthrown, or not looked to. So there's a lot of frustration, I think, within the offense. But when you say put all the blame on Eli, you have to. You have to do that with any quarterback, especially a franchise quarterback who's a 2-time MVP.
Stephen A.
I completely agree with Antonio. It's on Eli as far as I'm concerned. As a matter of fact, I put the Odell Beckham immaturity situation on Eli as well. Because Odell Beckham Jr. is 23 years of age. He is a stud. He is a miniature in size. And as a result, he's a target for bigger yet athletically inferior football players that go up against him. So he's going out on that field. He's getting open. He's doing what he's got to do. And he's playing for a quarterback that's not getting him the ball. That in no way absolves him from how he's conducted himself. It's no way to be apologetic about it. He cannot do that. I understand it. But understand where the responsibility lies as it speaks to his frustration and that of this team. Let's also take into account the fact that the offensive line, as shabby as it may be, that's been the case for years. We've seen Eli play better. By the way, he's played better with fewer weapons. He only had Odell Beckham Jr. last year. He's got Sterling Shepard this year with Victor Cruz back and Odell Beckham Jr. still there. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you have more weapons now than you ever did before. You just ain't playing up to snuff, which brings me to Ben McAdoo, the head coach. Well, you were the offensive coordinator, somebody that Eli had developed a rapport with. The responsibilities that you have as a head coach are far more extensive than what you had as an offensive coordinator. And as a result, you didn't get to focus primarily on Eli Manning the way you were able to do so in the past. Now you've got other responsibilities, which is why the Giants should have been careful about what they decided to do. If you're going to let Tom Coughlin go, let everybody go. And if you're going to keep everybody else, why not just keep Tom Coughlin as opposed to making him the scapegoat? These are the kind of things that have happened to the New York Giants. Because say what you want about Tom Coughlin, and I was one that believes your time comes. And it ain't that you're a bad coach, that you can't coach. You do get to a point where it is time for a new voice. The flip side is, think about how structured and disciplined Tom Coughlin is and was. Think about who he is and think about what he mandated from the rest of the team. Ben McAdoo doesn't seem to be that fixated on things the way Tom Coughlin was. And that seems to me to have made the environment a touch more chaotic, which could be more impactful in terms of from a distraction standpoint for Eli Manning. I think all of those things in some way have contributed to Eli's struggles thus far.
I want to talk about McAdoo for a second and the lack of discipline, Antonio, because on the one hand, you have the Eric Flowers incident, who's been playing poorly since he's been a Giant, but you look at the raw talent, and he's only 22 years old, and left tackle's a skills position. Some guys, it takes some time. Right, okay. He seems to have a rough attitude and everything. Some of the stuff you like to see at that position, but he shoves an ESPN reporter, and now the league's looking into it. McAdoo,
he should be suspended,
right,
Max.
McAdoo didn't suspend him right away, which leads me to believe, as poorly as Flowers has played at left tackle, what's the alternative? And because McAdoo feels like we got to win our next game, Ravens at home, that's a real thing, that kind of discipline, because McAdoo, and then when you look at this, the struggle of the offense, McAdoo's only there because of the offense, because Eli seemed to like the offense at a certain point better than Gilbride's offense, so now he's there. The offense is struggling, and they're undisciplined.
I've only been in this situation one time in my career, and I had 4 head coaches throughout my career. It was Steve Spurrier, where he was the head coach and offensive coordinator, and he couldn't mandate, he couldn't control the roster. There's a lot of things that happened that he really probably had no idea about or did not know how to handle, because he was focusing on his offense. And sometimes as a head coach, when you have the duty of either calling the offense or defense, things slip through. Now, that's where Steve Spagnuolo needs to step in now, right? He's been a head coach. He was kept on that coaching staff there to be kind of like plan A or B with that coaching staff. And I think with McAdoo, not just the Eric Flowers incident, it goes back to Odell Beckham, right? It goes back to, like, every locker room changes with head coaches, but there's a lot of things that's changed in that Giants locker room. Now when you start to watch the team play, you said, well, maybe that's the reason what's going on. Maybe it's a little too loose over there. And again, you need to change it up a little bit from Coach Coughlin. But in the market they're in, being in New York, man, if you don't have structure and you're letting the guys just run wild and not really have accountability for their actions, this is the result you get. You get a losing record.
Is Odell justified? I agree with Steve, and we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks. Odell, when he was going crazy, it's because, look, I'm open and you're not seeing me. Right. And then when you are seeing me, you're throwing behind me. You're not hitting me on my steps.
No, he had a valid point about that. I mean, I was at the game against Redskins, and it was blindly how open he was. Just didn't happen. But again, this all goes back to, at the end of the day, Eli, win or lose as a Giant, you win with Eli or lose with Eli, and he has to step his game up.
No question. Antonio, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, bro.
Coming up next, President Obama sat down with Stan Verrett last night for a very enlightening conversation. We'll react to his comments next.
My attitude with respect to all young people, including athletes who may have a higher profile, is you get engaged, you get involved, you get educated about the issues that are affecting your lives, and then figure out what's the best way for you to make a difference. Some people may decide that's through protests. Others may decide, I want to mentor. So my advice is not that there's one way of bringing about change. I think there are multiple ways of bringing about change. If you are committed, engaged, and have studied the issues, then you'll have a positive impact and you'll find what feels right for you.
That was the president appearing last night on ESPN's town hall from the campus of North Carolina A&T, which is the nation's largest historically black university. Stephen A., what was your reaction to the town hall last night?
Well, I deeply appreciated our president saying what he said, highlighting how there are a multitude of ways to make a difference. You know, he's talking about it's not just about protesting. Sometimes it could be about mentoring. Sometimes it could be about putting your money where your mouth is behind certain causes. Sometimes it could be uplifting young brothers and sisters by playing the role of mentors, you know, taking them to games, meeting them for lunch, having conversations with them, advising them, counseling them, etc. It harkens me back to something, somebody I have great admiration for, my man Joe Madison, who hosts the Sirius XM radio show on the Urban View channel. He's always asking his callers, okay, I hear what you're saying. What are you going to do about it? There are a multitude of things that you can do. You can call your local councilman or woman. You can call your local congressman or woman. You can call your local senator, et cetera, et cetera. You can do things to make a difference. The reason why that resonates with me so profoundly, y'all, allow me to be incredibly open about myself and what a multitude of African Americans have to endure who are in the public eye, who are deemed to have a voice. On far too many occasions, one of the issues that exist within our community is that people want to define for you what you should be doing. And they want to highlight one specific way or one specific thing you should be doing in order for you to make a difference. And if you don't do it their way, they got a problem. Allow me to give you a perfect example, Max. So many times we talk about Michael Jordan and how Michael Jordan, we attach that infamous, bad sort of negligent quote where he talked about how Republicans buy sneakers too, something he said in the 80s or 90s. And obviously, you would have preferred at times that he was a Jim Brown, that he was a Kurt Flood, that he was a Muhammad Ali, okay? That he was even a LeBron James who's been willing to speak out on a bevy of issues in recent memory. But we ignore the fact that he's almost a billionaire, if not a billionaire already, that he employs black people, that he puts money in the pockets of African Americans who he employs, that he helps to educate folks. Same thing with a Kobe, same thing with a LeBron, etc. We ignore those kind of things because we want to define what somebody is supposed to be doing. So for the president to come out and to say, there's not one particular way to skin a cat, and there's not one particular way to be, or to attribute or to give a contribution to our communities, I think that was incredibly important, particularly considering the locale, which was North Carolina A&T, which is right down the road from my alma mater, right up the road from my alma mater. Great university, by the way.
I want to piggyback off what you just said, Stephen A., because expressions of anger and protest frequently, for example, Kaepernick's and many athletes, that can be constructive, and the president wasn't saying it can't be constructive. He's saying in times that is good, if that's a platform you can use. But oftentimes expressions of anger feel good in the moment, but that moment is fleeting. You know, it almost acts as a safety valve. You don't like the way things are, the status quo isn't good, and so you're going to say something, and you feel helpless about it, you express your anger, and you stick it to the man. And then that little safety valve releases that steam, and you just go back to life in the status quo as it was. And what the president was saying, I mean, a significant protest is, sure, it's good, but you can also, just by like mentoring a kid, sticking it to the man feels good in the moment, but helping a kid actually has a lasting effect over the long run. And so there are various ways that you can make societal contributions and change the status quo that don't have to be just an outward expression of anger that feels good in the moment, a protest that if you have a platform to do it, there are all kinds of ways that people can chip in. I thought that was very good. I thought Stan Verrett, by the way, used that Sawatsky technique, that's the interview guru here at ESPN, and put the president right in describe, explain mode, and did a fantastic job. The president had to carefully choose his words because Stan was doing such a good job with the interview.
Knowing our company, he probably met with Sawatsky for about 10 hours before the Obama interview. But let me also say this. Listen, what you're essentially saying is that you got to take into account the repercussions as well, because sometimes getting caught in the moment of emotions, it feels good to exhale at that particular moment in time. It doesn't take into account the collateral damage and the ultimate ramifications that could come to follow because of those few moments of emotions. These are the kind of things that we have to take into consideration. Just a few weeks ago, you had Isaiah Washington, the former actor from Grey's Anatomy, who's an outstanding actor, by the way, really, really wanting black folks not to spend their money on a particular day just to bring attention to the cause that the African-American community finds itself fighting against in this day and age. Whereas a justice columnist, Sean King, for the New York Daily News, appeared to be a bit more organized in what he wanted to do. But instead of joining in initially, what Isaiah Washington wanted folks to do was join him. And then when folks didn't do that, then ultimately he modified his position. But again, people sometimes are not on the same page, coming from two different places. Although the goals and the agendas may very well be the same, some things need to be thought out. things don't need to be initially reacted upon, particularly based off of emotion. Because when you do that, you usually lose.
That's expedient and feels good, but the doing part is harder. And I thought the president focused on that very well.
And if you missed the town hall, you can check it out on theundefeated.com, their website. A ton of great content there. Coming up, is LeBron treating his teammates like he's their dad? We'll tell you what he's upset about with his squad. That's next. While waiting to speak to the media on Saturday night, LeBron James was a very, very busy man. He was picking up laundry bags of his teammates and brought them into the locker room to an attendant, something he was not very happy about. Hopefully, I only have to say something once. Can't leave the locker room like that. Max?
Yep.
Is this a big deal?
It is a big deal. This is a big deal. And LeBron James picking up laundry bags, Stephen A. Smith, is a big deal. That is leadership. Let me tell you something that Buck Showalter once told me. Before he signs a guy, before they're actually going to bring a guy into the organization, a player, he finds out from the franchise that player is coming from the parking attendant, what's this guy like? From the guy who sweeps up, what's this guy like? Not just from teammates and coaches and managers and GMs.
Smart.
He finds out what the person is like around the people who that person doesn't stand to gain from. Just what kind of person is he? And this is the kind of person LeBron James is. The biggest star on planet Earth. I think I can say that without exaggeration. He's the biggest celebrity there is, who's not a head of state maybe. This is LeBron James going around picking up laundry bags because he's considerate, not just because of respect for one's workplace, work environment, but because he's considerate of the people around him, the people who would otherwise have to do it. And when the biggest star on earth is cleaning up after scrubs, because next to him everyone's a scrub, boy, those other guys better get in line. And this goes right in line to me, Stephen A., with the guy LeBron's always been. Someone with LeBron James's level of talent can easily be isolated by it. We've seen that happen to plenty of superstars. But that's not how he uses his gifts. LeBron has, and always has, used his gifts to elevate everyone, to lift them up and take them along on the ride. And in this instance, I think we see another example.
You're right about the fact that it's a big deal. You're wrong as to why it is. It's not a big deal just because LeBron James, the greatest basketball player in the world, the biggest iconic sports superstar there is, decided to clean up. It speaks to a culture you want to make sure you knock down before it ever gains any momentum. Take into account the fact that the average league salary in the National Basketball Association is in excess of $5 million annually. What scrubs average in the NBA, the people working for these teams will never make in a lifetime. As a result, because you can't live vicariously through these individuals in most instances, you're going to pass judgment as to who they are, whatever the case may be. And you're going to usually assume the worst because envy and jealousy permeates our society and beyond. It's no different anywhere. You can't be an individual that sits up there, your drawers, your socks, and all of this other stuff. You have no problem leaving stuff around. You have no regard for locker room attendants and others because it speaks to a level of privilege you believe you have, and you're thereby minimizing and diminishing other human beings. And anytime you're that way, it is bad in and of itself. But it particularly resonates with somebody like LeBron James, myself, and others when you're African American, when it's widely perceived that you are individuals that are very, very fortunate and blessed to be in the position that you're in, because a lot more often than not, we hear about the rag to riches stories when it comes to these athletes on professional levels. It's just a fact that those stories permeate the news wires, the airwaves, and beyond every day. LeBron James is cognizant of that. I'm cognizant of that. It's something that we're mindful of. Obviously, there are other athletes, not just African Americans in that locker room, and I'm sure there's probably others that left their stuff around. But I'm saying when you look at a sport like that, you have to be cognizant, because sometimes those locker room attendants are one of your own, and they're a bit older, and the respect that you need to show them and the appreciation that you need to give them is incredibly important, because they never got it anywhere else in their life.
In this case, by the way, it also dovetails very nicely with talk about changing the culture, a winning culture in a franchise. Get rid of that entitlement. Oh, you
Yep.
you won the title, you're something, you can leave your drawers around. No, you can't. You're not, it's a new season. So it doesn't always work like that, that the right thing to do is also the right thing to do for winning, although we wish it did. But in this case, I think it absolutely dovetails perfectly.
Know where your blessings come from.
Of course.
And appreciate that.
I'm so with you guys. Makes me respect him even more that he can be the white collar and the blue collar. Coming up, Tim Tebow played his first game with the Fall League, and he sure made an impact. We'll show you how. That's next.
First Take is brought to you by the new Bacon King Sandwich. 6 strips of crispy bacon piled atop a half pound of 100% beef. Only at Burger King.
Don't miss First Take this Friday. Comedian and actor Kevin Hart will be here in studio. Always fireworks when he's on the show. Friday, right here on First Take. Meanwhile, Tim Tebow made his Arizona Fall League debut on Tuesday. He went 0 for 3 with 3 groundouts. He wasn't much better in the field, slamming into the wall, trying to make a catch. But after the game, Tebow spent 15 to 20 minutes comforting a fan who had a seizure while waiting for the paramedics to arrive. Max, what do you make of his day?
Look, Tim Tebow's not going to make the major leagues. That's not what this is about. But he's going to do some awesome stuff in trying to make the major leagues. The Arizona Fall League, that's not just where you send no prospects. There are prospects there. He homered on the first pitch originally the other way, off a lefty as a left-handed batter, and then busted it out of the box. And here even he goes 0 for 3 and slams into the wall, doesn't look good at the plate or in the field, but then does something awesome. This is why people are interested in Tim Tebow. The journey will be fun. It will certainly result in ultimate failure in terms of the majors, but it'll be fun to watch, Stephen A.
It will be fun to watch, but what are we supposed to say about it? It's an absolutely wonderful gesture on his part. He's a God-fearing, decent, good human being. What else is there to say? I mean, the fact of the matter is we're asking these questions because we seem to look and search for great things to say about Tim Tebow. There's no need when it comes to his character. He's a damn good man. He's a wonderful person. He just happens to be somebody that can't throw a football and has no business playing Major League Baseball. That's all I have to say.
And yet was able to beat the Steelers in the playoffs. That's the weird thing about it.
Miracles happen.
It's weird.
We do appreciate his heart all collectively.
Miracles happen.
He was an angel out there.
I can throw one pass.
Yeah? A dead clock's right
One.
twice a day, right? So it can happen.
There you go.
Bye, everybody. That's his line.